Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Overfilled, the podcast. I'm Dr. Jamie Kuzer. I'm joined by my fun colleagues and besties, Dr. Brooke Messer, Dr. Jason Jedlicka. So today we're going to talk all about GSLS and our fun recaps of the great week that we just had in Las Vegas. It was obviously so fun to see you guys in person. We love running around, causing shenanigans together. So we do have a few pictures of some of the shenanigans that we got to do that Brooke put together. Jason, you want to throw up some of these fun pictures?
Yeah, and I just do want to add too, for those people who panicked when they really thought Jamie was off the show, that I'm sure they're glad to see you back again.
Yeah,
That is true. I did get a lot of DMs from people thinking that I was truly off the show. But if you actually listen to the entire episode, you would know that I was actually just gone at. I was just gone at a workshop because sometimes we have to travel on Wednesdays for record. But don't worry, I am here. They didn't kick me off the team.
yeah.
Well, here you go with a famous new drink that we made up, right?
Yeah. So Jason and I, this is at the Find Your Zen event, and we showed up. And normally the Bausch and Lomb marketing groups are just so fun. They have so many good ideas, so many neat attention to details. And so we both walked up and we're like, "Yeah, we'll take like the drink of the night." And the bartender was, asking, what? And so we said, well, is there any way you can make it like purple? And then this was the best we got, but it was really quite nice. And as you can see, Jason's wearing his Zen purple, looking fantastic with the Zen tie. And so that was nice. Yeah. So that was on Friday night, and it's an event that Bausch and Lomb hosts for the residents and some of their speakers, KOLs, things like that. And so we had a really nice time at this venue. And always a good time on that Friday night event.
That drink was good. I did copy you and got the same thing. I know at Academy they had one. It was called the Zen Fizz, remember?
Right?
That was a really cool signature drink. But
and it had like
make sure next time we get somebody on that in advance.
Yeah. So, but our bartender was good. He kind of did it on the fly and took good care of us, and that was that. So. Jamie and I on the Academy floor. What's that?
Speaking of drinks.
Yeah, I know. They did have a drink called the Jamie, which was very exciting when we all went out with our Zenlands team.
Yeah.
I, of course, had to order it.
Yeah.
And I secretly told the bartender that was my name, or the server. And so then when he came, he like presented it to me. And it was so funny when other people at the table were like, how did they know?
Yeah.
How did they know that was your name?
Yeah. The guy who was taking care of us that night did a really nice job. And so we came across the Jamie, and so of course we had to celebrate with a few of those. It was a nice sweet drink, and then Jamie and I on the exhibit hall floor, sporting our color of the year in this burgundy. And the other thing I thought was kind of fun is there's a lot of big people back there. We got Muriel, we got Jason Nichols, we have Jen Harthen, we got Longy. So I was like, oh, that's a pretty good like who's who.
That's so funny.
In the background, and Jason was right in front of us, so he's not far from this picture as well. He was literally standing next to us.
That's funny.
And had to take some education, of course, and the man Trevor Faso back there enjoying the thumbs up.
That was when you told him that he couldn't sit with us because Jason was freezing.
Right.
Yeah, I was saving spots for these two because I hyperventilate when I'm at big meetings and I don't have them beside me. And then Trevor came by and I was like, sorry, no. So he sat behind.
Can't sit with us.
Yeah.
Sit next to us.
Of course, well, 2 of the 3 followed the rules here and understood the assignment. But
and which one of you 2 broke the rules is what I want to know.
We Bausch and Lomb launched the Zenlens Chroma, which is their higher order aberration technology on the Zenlens platform, and so the 3 of us got to be part of that, which was really fun.
Mm-hmm. And we had a little fun with it.
Yes, we did. Lots of good fun there. Bill Shelley received an award. Well, actually, there was an award in his honor now in the Bausch and Lomb sales side, and he came out to present the award. And so we've seen Bill Shelley on the show before, and just a wonderful guy and great storyteller. And so it was really fun to connect with him again. And Jason, you probably have way more stories about Bill than I do, but always good to be together.
Yeah, and if you didn't know that Bill had been on the show previously, then shame on you for not watching all of our old episodes. Go back and watch them all. They're on YouTube and Spotify.
He was so happy to be at the meeting too. He told me he was just so happy to be back in action. So
he was the star of the show. So many people commented on like, Bill's here. So that was nice.
Speaking of Bill, you want to go with this one?
Yeah, this is in one of the first months. We couldn't decide if this first picture on the left was 2011 or 2010, or excuse me, 2011 or 2012. But this is shortly after I joined Jason in private practice, and Bill came to visit and took us out for dinner. And so this is kind of a then and now picture many years later, at least 14 years later. And we're still all looking pretty good.
Pretty good. Although the best part of this was I could tell right away that Bill had shrunk, because look at the picture of us now. And then he had me by a good inch or two back then. And I think we're pretty much the same. So we had to take a picture to prove that, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we enjoyed that too, and we pretty much ruled it out, or we confirmed that Jason's flow, the volume, is not the source of the height. He is truly taller.
Part of it, but it's not all of it.
He's truly taller than Bill now.
Correct, yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So
for
those of you who, I'm sure you all know who Ed Bennett is, because everyone who watches this is a scleral fitter, is a GP fan. And so every year at GSLS on Friday night, there is an event called the Friends of Ed. And Brooke and I are lucky enough to get to go to that. Jamie could have probably worked her way in if she really wanted to. So anyway, one of the traditions, other than it's always at the Hofbräu House, and Ed always gets paddled by the waitress, and we always have a liter of beer. We have these Elvis glasses, which Brooke is the one who probably started them. Yeah. How did that all start, by the way?
So it was during my GPLI residence event when we were in Memphis, and it happened to be my birthday, my 27th birthday, and the second is it was like an Elvis weekend, and so there were Elvis people all over Memphis, and we ended up getting these glasses in like a beer bucket, and it was Tom Quinn, Ed Bennett, Keith Parker. There might have been one other person with us, and I'm really sad that I can't remember, and then myself and 4 other co-residents. So that's how we became to be known as the Fab Five in our residency class. And we basically take pictures together with Elvis glasses on every year since.
Did you know I actually was in Memphis my GPLI year, and I had the same glasses, and I did not know that they originated with you guys. They were in like our hotel room when we checked in.
Oh,
that was like when I was new to the the industry. We're just all new residents, and we're like, what's up with these glasses? And then we went around Memphis, and it was so much fun too. That's so funny. I didn't know your year was also in Memphis.
Yep, it was, and that was the year. Long live Elvis glasses for sure.
I think when we get this thing published and we get it on there, you guys need to make like a reel or something, and you need to like hashtag a bunch of stuff with this one, like Elvis and all that good stuff.
Yeah, that would probably get a lot of views.
We'll get a lot of views from that.
From people who we're not necessarily targeting, but that's okay.
Correct.
Here you go, Jamie.
And this was me. So here's my little background story. I was having like a really grateful day that day. And I had just gotten a text from one of my patients that we'd been struggling with getting his lens right. And he was telling me how happy he was that day. And I was super excited. And then I went to go to the Zen Lens booth to see Chroma. I was excited to see Chroma. I think anytime you work on like a lens for a while, like it's just a really cool thing to see it in real life. And then I turned the corner of the booth, and these are all my patients from their patient experience video that they did at my office. And I just turned the booth corner, and I saw all my patients' faces, and I just started bawling. So anybody that saw me in the exhibit hall just randomly crying, it was because I didn't know this was going to be up there. And I know we've talked about this before. It's just like, these are real people, right? These are people that were crying in my office, going through like their struggles, and it was just really cool to see them. But I also look like a crazy person crying, randomly happy to see a huge like billboard of my patients. So I like ducked into the little closet I know people are looking at me like I was crazy, especially the men. The men are like, "Ooh, what is she crying about? I'm getting out of here." But it was really cool. I took a picture of it, and then I scanned all little QR codes because they had all their individual videos. And I'm going to send it to my patients because they were really excited to be part of a project too. Just kind of share the good news of scleral lenses. So that was like a big thing for me that made me super excited.
So obviously, GSLS overfills us all. And if you guys have not been to one, and not you two, but I mean our loyal listeners, you need to come because it's a great meeting. There's no meeting like it when it comes to specialty lenses. And it's just a big, happy family. If you ever wanted to come to a meeting and feel like you were part of all this good stuff, you would be. So highly recommend coming out to GSLS next January. I believe it's the 7th through the 10th next year.
Yeah,
and
it's early.
The Paris Hotel, which is nice. So no excuses not to come out. And oh yeah, did we learn anything while we were there?
Well, I learned about these cool little books, and can you see it? Oh, I might have to turn off my green screen. But they're like little fun little books that record us dancing. And so anyway, maybe I can just like throw up a picture. But it's basically, it's a little flip book that shows the thing. And so we got Jason there with his crown on, and so we were having a good time. Those are fun little graphics that you can see us dancing there. Anyway, did we learn anything while we were there? Do you have that next picture?
I do.
Yeah. So I attended the IFSLR, which is the International Forum for Scleral Lens Research, and it's the day ahead of GSLS. And there's just a small registration fee. And to be honest, I really got a lot out of it. We just talk about what we think about with scleral lenses, rather than, and it's more group discussion based versus, like a Cope lecture style. And this is an image that I snuck from Josh Latotsky's lecture from the Michigan College of Optometry. And the conversation was on IOP under scleral lenses. And that's been a topic for a long time. We've been trying to decide, is it something that we're really concerned about with our scleral lens patients or not? And his study and research basically showed that the cornea does get pulled up into the scleral lens a little bit, and it increases in volume. It actually gets larger. And so to get larger, it has to pull in more aqueous into the anterior chamber. And so when you remove the lens, there's going to be more aqueous in the anterior chamber immediately after removal. And sometimes that's when we measure a few points of increase. And so his suggestion or sort of working hypothesis on IOP increase under sclerals is maybe just short-lived in those immediate moments post-removal, because the cornea will temporarily have more aqueous, therefore making the cornea more, seemingly like it has more pressure in the anterior chamber. And I thought that was really neat, like something that we can actually kind of grip onto and understand, because the cornea will kind of normalize under the lens. And then when the lens comes off, it renormalizes. And we all know that IOP can change very quickly in situations like this. And so perhaps the concern about IOP under scleral is finally becoming maybe less concerned, or less concerning, or maybe we can all sleep a little bit better at night. And, Jason and I were chatting about this too, that we've been fitting sclerals for so long now that it seems we would have more patients with optic nerve issues if it really was, a high risk. There were some presentations on changes in Bruch's membrane and the minimum rim width around the optic nerve, or at the optic nerve, during and after and before scleral lens wear, which, still maybe give us a moment of concern. So I think it's one of those things that thankfully I don't lose a ton of sleep at night as long as I know my patients are wearing well-fit scleral lenses. And it's important that we just continue to monitor them. But, the pressure concern is maybe not what it once was. And we're beginning to understand more where that pressure comes. Those small pressure increases show up immediately after lens removal.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that is consistent with our experience with it. That, especially in anybody you have a real concern over their IOP, we always like to wait 15 or 20 minutes after their lens removal, at least, to measure their pressure. And the other thing I think that's interesting about this, well, there's a couple things. First of all, on the after 4 hours of wear, the angle at the bottom, 42 degrees compared to, what does that say, 38 above, something like that. So the cornea at the angle is deeper, or it's increased in angle. It's more open, correct? You move up from that, it says 33.9 compared to 34.5. So it's actually a little flatter in the mid-periphery. And my guess would have to be is that it's even flatter centrally compared to before. It doesn't have that reading there. But that would explain why for years, most of the studies show that when you immediately remove a scleral lens, your central corneas are flatter. And my thought was that I didn't understand that exactly. I thought if the cornea is being pulled up into the back of the scleral, it should actually be steepening it. But the pulling has more impact in the periphery than it does centrally, where there's and so that makes sense now, and so that's very interesting. But the other thing about that too is this whole idea of limbal touch.
Right.
That if the cornea is going to be drawn up, and so again, the difference between limbal touch and limbal bearing. And so you guys know me, everybody who knows me knows this whole concept of limbal clearance is just kind of hogwash, if you will. The reality is that we just don't want the junction of our lens, the beginning, the inner aspect of our haptic, to land on the limbus. If the inner part of our haptic lands beyond the limbus, you shouldn't have to worry about any contact between the limbus and the lens internal to that, as long as it's not bearing the weight of the lens. So I think this just bears that out, that when you put a lens on, you might have limbal clearance, but within a matter of minutes, or certainly within an hour or two, that clearance is gone. But it's not because the lens is bearing on the limbus. It's because the limbus has been drawn up into contact with the back of the lens in a gentle fashion.
And I have seen so many more problems with the limbal area related to excessive clearance and steep approaches with like conch prolapse and limbal thickening. And you get kind of that like red ring. And so you're like decrease, trying to like decrease that suction forces. Then, the limbal alignment. So sometimes I tell my residents too that if we're cresting the limbus, not bearing, we're cresting, then I feel pretty good about that. And yet to have somebody with complications, again, seem to have way more redness and some corneal warping with lens removal, making it harder to wear their glasses when the lenses come out, when that approach is too steep. And so maybe I'm just overly biased with you, Jason, because you're Jason and I'm Brooke. But I would agree with you that I almost prefer to have, minimal, no bearing.
Right. And like you've talked about before, soft lenses are on the limbus all the time.
Yes.
Or if you think about some of these gas berms, like corneal gas berms, like every time the patient is blinking, it's moving, it's rubbing against the limbus. Like you're actually having mechanical friction. Versus the lens just, yeah. So, I agree. Also, I know sometimes when we say that, people get a little like, oh my God, the limbus. But it's different. Like if there's staining, like you got to look for staining.
Sure.
Right? So.
And what'll happen too, like, this is another reason why centration is really important, because if you say, my cornea is 12 millimeters, and if I want to add a 0.5 millimeter for limbus on either side, that puts me at 13, and my lens has a chamber of like 13.5, then that should be fine to clear the limbus as long as it centers.
Right.
Now, if it decenters because you've got some poor fit issues going on, you might actually bear the limbus in that case if it's decentering, and that's why centering the lens is pretty important.
Yeah. I think this is like a miniature call to action. I'm just going to throw this out there because at ICSC this summer, we're hoping to have a session on controversies. And like Jason, you're very vocal about some controversies, both in like orthokeratology, atropine use, scleral lenses versus corneal GPs on patients with keratoconus. And I think this limbal one could be another. But for those of you who are listening, I would love to see like a comment on Instagram on do you have any controversies, and where do you stand on the side of these controversies in scleral lens fitting, when, you know, maybe other people think it's a big deal, but you don't find it so, or vice versa, where you do think it's a big deal and others say maybe not, you know, like conjunctival prolapse is one too, where some people feel it's less of an issue. Others are really bothered by it. So throw a chat down and let me know what controversies you're looking to see a nice debate on at ICSC this year.
I'm also interested too if this was a fenestrated lens, if it would still do the same thing with the cornea being sucked up or not.
It's probably less, right?
Probably you would think it would be less, but so hey, you should study that, Brooke, because you have a beautiful OCT like this.
Maybe I can do that.
This was a really interesting. So thanks for sharing that.
I did just get 8 study lenses that my I can't do anything. 8 study lenses that my resident and I recently designed that we're going to throw on some eyes and see what happens with lens centration. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I feel like the most takeaways that I actually had, and I always tell residents this too, is I feel like you learn a lot more outside the lecture halls than inside. Just talking to your colleagues, and I totally agree. I was chatting with a couple colleagues, just for me in particular, because my practice has been open 2 years, and their practice has been open 5. And so just being able to pick their brain about, okay, like how did you manage growth? What are some suggestions that you have? What about marketing? What about adding an associate? From someone that's a couple years past where you're at, just to really be able to pick someone's brain one-on-one. And that was super helpful to me. And that was just something that, over a cocktail, like you learn a lot that you can take home immediately to your practice. I mean, another thing too, mine was more like when we were preparing our lecture that I did with Trevor Faso, just the thought of, for me, toric IOLs in irregular cornea patients. I always just said, absolutely no, absolutely no. But recently, unfortunately, I've had some patients have to go into either memory care or, facilities where they can't wear their scleral lenses. And so part of me wishes, man, I wish I would have encouraged that patient to at least have a toric IOL to be functional without their lens. Like I can always, minimize the toric IOL with the scleral if it doesn't go right. But it's also really devastating when you're like, man, I wish that I could have at least gotten that patient to 20/70 without their lens at end of life care. So he kind of brought that up, and I thought that was really interesting way to think about it. Like, we're not promising that you don't need your scleral, but we're promising like you're less dependent on it if the time comes when you're older, unfortunately. So it just kind of made me think about how I manage my patients moving on in the future. So
yeah, I think that's an interesting point. And the only issue I'll say with that is when you have a fairly toric lens, if you implant like an IOL that has 3 diopters of cylinder correction, let's say, and then on top of that you have an irregular cornea, and if you're going to try to negate the cylinder of that lens through your scleral lens, you will, unless it's just perfect, you will compound the problem rather than helping it when they wear their lens. It will be far more difficult to achieve the best visual outcome when you have a toric IOL and a toric scleral on either end of that optical system, because any 2 degrees, 3 degrees of rotation is the same as having a 3 diopter toric soft lens that rotates 5 degrees, but it'll actually be double the effect because you're offsetting them
right
by that. So I get it. I'm still not convinced that there are very few times when I would want to go that route, because again, if the patient can see that much better by just correcting 3 diopters of their cylinder, and they're aged and failing, then a pair of glasses can do it too.
Yeah. And that was one thing too. He said, like, if they can be corrected with a pair of glasses, even if it's just one eye, like the case that he presented, like he just had the patient do it in the one eye that was the dominant eye, then I think that they're a good candidate for it. It's just, but sometimes if their glasses are so like aniso that they physically couldn't wear it because of how different they are. Also, I think like surgical, like toric IOLs are getting a lot more precise with the way that they're doing surgery nowadays. And I know, Brooke, you can probably talk to that because you work with a lot more surgeons, but just learning about some of their technology and how they're so precise at getting those axes correct. But I guess it depends on your surgeon. So you have to know how good your surgeon is before you just start referring them out to, everyone down the street for that. But I'm also very protective of my irregular cornea patients, so I make sure they go to who I want them to go to for surgery.
Yeah.
But again, it depends on when if you're going to fit that eye in a scleral lens later,
Right.
and you're going to have to undo all that cylinder in their lens,
Mm-hmm.
and that lens is 5 degrees off from aligning to the IOL. It doesn't matter how good the implant is, because ultimately their astigmatism's irregular anyway. So you're never going to properly correct it all the way. You're going to reduce it to an extent, but to put the scleral lens on and then undo it through a front toric, again, that patient has to understand this process is going to be a bit more complicated than if they had just chosen a straightforward spherical IOL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really depends on goals and patient's
Yep.
desire, like on their wearing time of their sclerals, and how they feel about that. And we, have patients that go both ways, being in a cataract surgery clinic. For some reason, I feel like patients who have corneal transplants that end up with a toric IOL do better than patients with keratoconus, and a toric IOL with the scleral on top. So like all optical systems aligned. And I'm sure it has to do with the aberrations, but like, to me, if the patient has a transplant and they have like a clear axis, refractive axis where the astigmatism improves their vision without the scleral, then I'm like a little bit more encouraging if they're willing to invest in the IOL, because for some reason I feel like they do better on the backside with the scleral when it comes to negating everything. I don't know. That's just.
Yeah. Well, I'm just trying to think of any patient that has an irregular cornea that wears scleral lenses that I've had who had a toric IOL and it had a happy ending. Like I can't think of one, and maybe that's because they don't need their scleral anymore and they're not coming back. But I can think of countless people where we've chased our tail with the cylinder and it's been very difficult to get it to be right. They always come back and your lens has 350 of sil in it and you overfract and you're getting a diopter. So you reorder it with a little twist in the axis and then you come back and it's like, oh, now I have a diopter the other way. And it's never as straightforward as if they just had a spherical IOL. It would be spherical optics all the way. And I would never have to put a front toric on their lens. It would just be a spherical lens on a spherical, I don't know. Again,
this is a good one. This is a controversies one, Brooke. You can have him fight Trevor, because Trevor actually has a lot of cases where they came out really well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, again,
maybe it's surgeon dependent or patient dependent, but you guys should fight that out at ICSC. You guys could like battle over like
Sure.
one over like the Livis and then one over like toric IOLs. It was just one of those things that made me think like, I haven't thought about that before. And maybe I'll think about it moving forward.
Again, it comes down to whether that patient understand, like you said, do they understand in advance that if or when they have to go back into a GP lens, that this is going to make getting the clearest vision consistently just a little more difficult. It might require a few more visits. They have to understand that. And if they're like, yeah, that's fine, I don't care, I'd rather take the chance and get a better visual outcome, that's fine. But again, the toricity that lens corrects is regular astigmatism, and a glasses prescription can do it just as well as the toric IOL. So again, if you say, well, but by putting in the 3 diopters of sil, it gets there uncorrected from 2100 to 2060, and that's more functional, I'd say then you could put 3 diopters of sil in a pair of glasses to get them to 2060 also. You're not correcting any of the irregularity with that IOL. You're just reducing their need for a cylinder in their glasses afterwards. I don't know.
So what do you, I like sitting by Jason during these GSLS lectures because he's not taking notes. He's like writing ideas for research down. And there was something about
I have a pad
maps
from the last meeting.
Yeah. Other things. And so I'm like trying to look down, like what's going through your mind. And anyway, what do you take away from GSLS, Jason?
I liked some of the ortho K topics. There was a lot of interesting. Kate Gifford gave some great talks about atropine and some good take homes. I liked that part. There was some interesting discussion on what really creates myopia control. So we're revisiting that sort of idea. So I think, between that and the HOA stuff, HOA was red hot. Everybody was talking about HOAs. So if you haven't taken the leap yet, more and more lenses available now with HOA correction. And I feel like if you're not offering your patients HOA correction in the near future, it's kind of like just fitting all your cones and glasses. You're depriving them of good vision. So I think that was a take home too. So lots of good stuff. Yeah. And I have some ideas, stuff I'd like to do now. If I ever get to do it, we'll find out.
Jason is so funny. I still remember one time we were in a lecture and he just randomly designed an ortho K lens and then showed it to me.
I texted a picture of it and texted it to Jamie, even though she was
you were like holding it up, and there was
because we were like 3 seats apart from each other
too. And he just designs a lens and then holds it up, and I'm like, what? And we're like communicating via notes, and people between us were probably like, what is happening? And then I'm like, don't show people that. Like, that's a great idea. Like, you don't show people your designs. But Jason is so funny to sit by, because he'll just look at it and be like, that's a good concept. I'm going to make a whole new lens. Yeah. Like, your brain just works in like a totally different way.
Well, you got to have someone to spark you with a good idea. That's what it comes. That's why going to these lectures is fun. Because again, like you said, even though you may not feel like this topic is necessarily stuff I'm going to learn a lot from, it only takes one comment that one person makes, and all of a sudden you get an idea. You're like, oh, I never thought about that. And then you're down a pathway of discovery. So
yeah, that's and that's really what it's all about. Like you said, Jamie, I agree that you kind of sit in the lectures to get your credits and everything. And of course there are amazing speakers. I agree that Kate Gifford delivers some just amazing, like very clinical things. And like you said, like they did all this retina signaling and things like this in myopia. And like, we have to know those things. But I agree. It's like those little things that make it worth going. And it's those one or two little comments about growing your practice and new technology that, again, that's where the research doesn't change a whole lot year over year, but what goes on in clinical practice does. And that really makes the meeting worth being at.
Yeah.
So,
well, what do we got? So we have to say before we go any further, before we announce our call to action, that we have gotten some cases. We've got some emails lately, and so we've got a couple episodes coming up where we've got some good cases to talk about. But we ran into a lot of people at GSLS that were like, "Hey, I want to be on your show," and we were just like, "You could have been anytime you wanted to be if you just create a video and send it to us."
Yes.
So, where is it? Call to action. Here we go. Send us
for the 100th time.
100th time.
Or like, if you just want to make a video and say like what you learned at GSLS.
Yeah,
I'd be happy to hear about that. I want to hear.
Yeah.
So we
make a little video about it.
Yeah. So we want anybody from docs to residents to students who are, in their later stages and doing this stuff in clinic. Anybody that's got an interesting case where you just thought, this is really cool, I want to talk about this or whatever, make a video of you talking and introduce yourself and where you're at and what you're up to. And here's my case. And I just wanted to share this with you, or I'd take any comments, or how would you fix that? And I promise we'll play it. And for Alex and Caitlin, who already sent us cases and are like, why haven't you talked about my case yet? We will do it the next 2 episodes. So send us your cases, and you know where, right?
Overfilled the podcast at gmail.com. And you can find us on Instagram, overfilled_the podcast, and also on Facebook. And so go ahead and send us your information. But it was great to be with you guys last weekend. Still catching up on all the piles of mess on my desk and my sleep and hydration, but it was well worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, get on those cases, everybody. And we'll see you guys next time.
See you.
See ya.